Hello, Adash. Thank you for joining this meeting.
Hey, thank you guys.
So this will be actually our first public grooming, so I will record it. Essentially, all community engineering meetings are being recorded as well, and I will share this into the channel. So today we will have some, I would say, experiments, some thoughts about the process at all. So if you have any comments, you can stop us. You can actually share your thoughts. So and please participate and join in our discussions. Thank you for your latest pull request. It was pretty good, and we really appreciate your contribution.
Thank you.
So we have, I would say, pretty huge amount of issues. First of all, I would like to share some information about the boards, how they are designed right now. So from the board's perspective, we have currently two projects. One project is a pull request progress. This is a board that Cloud team is using, and essentially I think maintainers will use to track the work on the delivery of pull request. And the second one is Magenta Cloud Docker Improvements, is essentially the Kanban board, which shows the progress of current issues. There are some interesting labels that I would like to point before we start. So I have added a label called good first issue for a few items because they seem pretty nice items to onboard in the Cloud Docker projects. They don't really need to deep knowledges, but we can essentially go through our backlog, and if we will find anything pretty good for onboarding to this Cloud Docker project, we can also add this label. There are next columns currently. There is ready for grooming. So ready for grooming is an item that we consider as not ready to be taken into the progress. So this will be our first target for today. There is also a ready for development column which has a label called accepted. Maybe we will change it, but it looks like pretty convenient. So this label represents the items which can be taken by any community member and into the process. So should be good to start. Also, we have a dev in progress column which represents the current issues which are being in progress by us or being in progress by community. Also, pull request in progress means that development was finished and there is a review or QA in progress. We have reviewers from our side. We also expect some reviewers from community. And we also have two quality engineers here in the Cloud team, which are happy and ready to help with the quality assurance of those issues. And once the quality approved and we merge the issue, it's moved to the down column. This is pretty all for the board. It is not really synced with the labels for now because it will require kind of deeper integration. We are working on this internally because it's not what GitHub can provide us. So we'll need some kind of middleware application to synchronize those statuses labels. But for now, we are doing this manually. So if there will be any changes, we will update the channel and the community. We can actually go through the top issues that we have currently just to look what is this, or we can already go through the labeled issues. Evgeny is our product owner. What do you think? How can we go through the top?
I would probably start with the architecture labeled issue. Those are kind of more high-level things.
Okay, good. So This one I created recently. I created this morning. So there is not so many contexts, but just want to give you the idea. So essentially, we are moving EC tools to be platform agnostic. We are adding scenario-based deployments, which will give you possibility to run different scenarios for different purposes. So I think that Docker should represent the same spirit of EC tools, the same way of thinking. So, but currently our Cloud Docker is pretty, I would say, tightly coupled with Magento Cloud projects. It reads the Magento app YAML, it reads the services, and so on. So I think it makes sense to make it a little less coupled. So people who are not only with Magento Cloud, maybe they have a different architecture, they have infrastructure, maybe they just whatever don't have Magento, didn't have composer packages, so they write some GitHub projects, some code from Git. It will be useful for them to also have a Docker environment, which will give them the possibility to quickly set up and demonstrate or run some tests in future. So the idea here is to not hardly couple on the Magento Cloud configuration files, but give possibility of flexible configuration of services and different options for Cloud Docker solution.
Question: how is it different from running the config command with parameters, like whatever versions you want to run?
Yeah, the thing is currently it will fail in default mode. So because it's will try to read the configuration and then fail until you know that actually you need to modify those options, it will fail.
Hey, so it's Matt.
Yep, Matt, proceed.
Yeah, hey. So I've had one of my guys looking at this scenario here. So how to run, so specifically we're trying to run the Docker environment on like an on-prem install of Magento, for example. And we've run into the same thing where we need to pull in stuff from the Magento Cloud repo in order to get that to work. So yeah, this would be a good one for us to work on if you wanted us to. Since I already had one guy kind of looking into it, but basically he found the same thing. You need to basically pull in files from the cloud repo to get it to even work. Otherwise, it'll fail. But we could work on making it where it doesn't require those files.
Yeah, we can think about some kind of default way with options and maybe somewhat of Magento Cloud. I don't really know what will be the good solution here, so I'm open for any kind of suggestions for discussion, but looks like this is something that we can improve and make Magento better here.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it much either, other than what you just said is kind of like set defaults if those files don't exist. But yeah, I think some more thought around the architecture would be good.
Cool.
Would having, for example, defaults mapped to Magento version be something good, or you want to be even more flexible?
You want to read Magento version
from Composer, for example, yeah.
Do you want to store the map of services into the Docker?
I'm not sure where to store that, but that way actually sounds, at least for me, sounds the most logical one, because in reality, we already have the suggestions what version should be used for what Magento, and essentially not all Magento versions are dependent or not dependent compatible with different services. So I wouldn't want probably to, get that burden of figuring out what is compatible with what to developer, essentially. The tooling probably should solve that out of the box. The question is only, how to properly do that so that we don't limit people. Mm-hmm. So essentially our options can probably override something easily. But in reality, I would say, I would love to see the tooling actually solving this challenge for developers out of the box without adding additional burden of, reading documentation or figuring out what are the compatibilities.
Okay, makes sense.
Does it sound good for you, Matt, too? Is it something you guys were looking at same
Yes.
way?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. I like the idea of all services kind of being there by default, and if people don't want to utilize some of them, that's fine, but they can still be there. But by default, if they're there and configured, it's nice.
Cool. Let's keep this idea. Let's keep a conversation on this issue. If you need any help, let ping us and we'll also help you. I think we can move it to approved or accepted. I'm not sure what is the difference in them.
Approved is LPR essentially.
Okay, accepted. Okay, next one is something that I personally didn't come with idea, but that what I solved on the another very nice project called I think how do they call Multigen sync. Like my Slack, just a little bit hung. Yeah, it's called Docker Multigen, and they use interesting way. So they have been scripts like Multigen, and the way they resolving it, they create two sessions for different purposes. So one is syncing the actually main scope of code, and another session syncs the vendor directory, which is essentially a very large one. And in case it fails, it doesn't fail both sessions, and you don't need to sync all of the scope of files. Also, what I liked in this script, they actually have possibility to kinda operate with a multigen, so they can start and stop and flash the session. So it looks pretty useful for me. So I really like those idea, and maybe we can come up with something similar. What do you guys think about this? Might make sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I think the bigger issue with mutagen still is I think there's a separate issue for this where you have the sessions that stay open. So like every time I use mutagen, I forget, like if I shut down my computer and go somewhere else and then restart it, I always forget to restart mutagen. Or if I shut down my Docker containers, mutagen's still running in the background. So now I would have two of these sessions to worry about, right? So I think if we can fix that issue first, then I think this would be good.
Okay, so let's keep it open for now. Let's then focus on the second issue, because I personally didn't really think the good way how to do this. So any idea of managing those mutagen sessions would be great. So actually, but I will just keep this so we can back this later.
I think during Cloud Lab on MLAU, when we were dry running it, we also found that when we have multiple sessions, there are some very weird things happening. And also, would be great to see if we can do something so that people don't run mutagen and Docker sync at the same time, because we happened to have that issue too. So some participants actually ran both because we had that, as example, and it created some really weird behaviors.
I personally don't really remember the last time I used Docker sync. Do you guys use Docker sync or mutagen?
I've been using Docker sync.
Docker sync. Okay. Okay, so let's keep it as is for now. Okay, so next one is called build container isolation. This is something not very tricky, but during one escalation I found that essentially currently build container has access to the MySQL and Elasticsearch and all of those services because they are located in the same network. This looks like some kind of deviation from the cloud environment, so I want to propose this to you and figure out if it's really need to be fixed or that's okay to go in the same way and let build container have the access to those services. What do you guys think? Is it worth your attention, or is this we can just ignore it?
You're saying you could remove the restriction that the build container can't access services?
Currently it can, because all of the containers they are located in the same network. So actually build has access to the database and the Redis, which is not correct from the cloud perspective. But we can pretty easily change it by adding new network and set the build container to work into an isolated network, and this will prevent it to have access to those services.
So
Yeah,
as
so
a possible, yeah, proceed. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I think it should be restricted so that it works the same way as cloud does, that you can test the build locally. But at the same time, I know of some people that are using the build container to run some commands because the build container has read-write access to the file system, whereas the deploy container does not. So that might hurt them if we take away the access to these services.
Doesn't customizing the deployment hooks solve that?
Hooks?
Yeah, because right now, if we customize hooks in Magento YML, essentially you can modify what build is doing. So hooks are now picked up by the Magento Cloud.
Yeah, they picked up, but if you will add this change, the guys who are using build container in some not expected way, like running commands to change the file system, they will lose this possibility, which is kind of actually not expected.
Yeah, that's essentially the question. So if guys are actually changing something on build container directly, not via hooks, essentially, it's, at least from our understanding, is not an expected flow. But if you might have any more details on that, or you can get those details from the team, it would be great to understand what guys are doing. Because essentially hooks are customizable already. So whatever we are doing custom on top of builds could be done there. Plus, when we release the scenario-based deploys, I think we could just customize everything through scenarios, right?
Yeah, pretty true. I just want to add this comment so you can consider this in the future.
I'm not sure if it's like a very big problem at this point, but it probably can be a problem if we have some bug, for example, with SCD, which doesn't look, if config PHP exists or not, and just tries to run it on builds without any guardrails. Then it can go to database and just pick up everything, even though it shouldn't have access to database at this point.
Yeah, I think so. If people really use build container to change something on a writable file system, this should not affect them, because actually it just won't have the access to the services like MySQL, but essentially nothing actually changed from perspective of access to those services. You can just directly stage into the MySQL whatever you want and do any changes there. So I think it should not really harm them.
Well, for example, you wouldn't be able to, if it was restricted, you wouldn't be able to run setup upgrade on the build container, right? Which you shouldn't be able to. But yeah. I know people have done it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd have to figure out if it actually caused any problems. I don't think so.
Okay. So keep it as is or make it improved.
Well, I think for consistency standpoint, it makes sense to improve it to actually behave the same way, because anyone who's using build servers mostly do that to generate artifacts before they actually push it anywhere. So running setup upgrade on build is probably not expected.
Yeah,
But I don't want to break anything, so if you might
yeah,
have any.
I would approve it. I think it's people just using it for convenience more than anything because you have access to everything. Read, write, file system, and all the services, but it's not the way it should be.
Yeah, and I would say in this particular case, I don't think we are kind of blocking anything, adding any hard block. So you still have the way to do that, but just I would say the expected correct way.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep it accepted. If anybody have any objections, please add comment and we'll back to this.
How does this relate to the platform agnostic Docker builder? I mean, are we trying to build something that is replicates cloud, or are we trying to go towards platform agnostic?
Actually, it's a good question too. So, yeah, I mean,
I think that essentially, once you go to the platform agnostic, you will actually change the whole behavior of your app YAML, I would say. You will change the behavior of the hooks. And essentially, your hooks may not be run on the build because in your platform, you may not have the build. It's essentially the arc, I would say, sync. So I think for consistency with current cloud, we can have this. And once we go to the platform agnostic, the hooks will look very different. And essentially, maybe you will run everything on the deploy container, which would make sense for your infrastructure.
yeah, actually, it may be possible if you right now want to do everything in that way. Essentially, you can probably move everything into deploy phase and run everything there. But I mean, that's anyway a valid command.
Yeah. And also, essentially, if we are going so deep, so the problem that we will have that currently we really read the hooks, which cannot be the case for platform agnostic, because on those platforms there will not even be magento.app.yaml file. So that's where that's very deep rabbit hole, but we have to consider those.
I mean, for platform agnostic, we can probably at some point add the whole possibility to just add phases, whatever else. So if you want to add, for example, some testing phase, kind of different hook, whatever, you can just get some schema, whatever, in place and run additional phases on top of what we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we just need to do some kind of constructor at some point to just get possibility to configure different phases. Like phase A, it's read-only, has no access to anything, or has access to everything, whatever else, and just define those parameters, what we can configure. And this way you can probably specify what exactly you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah, that's a big topic, and let's maybe postpone it for next meeting because there are so many open questions for now. Added something that would take away any of this service. Okay, that's what we discussed.
Our last question on this one, Joso, do you have any concerns on this one, or you're just trying more to make sure it fits the theme we discussed at the very beginning?
Yeah, it makes sense to treat platform agnostic as a separate effort for later. and it would make sense to replicate the cloud environment here in Docker then.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, test infrastructure. Do you want to jump on this proposal, or it's too big for our today's program?
I think since we don't have too much time left today, we could probably take this one for next time, because it's pretty much a big topic.
Yes.
And I think we'll need more time than 7 minutes to go over it.
Yeah, just for you guys, if you want to look at this, I will just give a few words on those things. So essentially, we are testing our pull request in the EC tools within Docker, as you may know. And the thing is, once we separated EC tools in different projects, we want to have also possibility to test those with Cloud Docker. But because the infrastructure that built in those environments to run tests is in EC tools, it's not possible right now. So we are looking to the way of moving those conceptual infrastructure to the Docker, so Docker can build those test environments by simple command. It's pretty big topic, so I think we'll back to this on next hour meeting. But if you have any thoughts, please leave comments so we can discuss it.
I would probably look at 94, which is next, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so the idea here essentially, because we know that Docker Compose not doesn't really stay as it was generated initially, and because our build compose rewrites it, we would like to figure out the correct way how we can still use build compose, but does not really harm the current configured Docker Compose. This is one of the solutions, like to merge new Docker Compose configuration on top of existing and preserve it. But if you have any thoughts on this, let's discuss.
I think it's also related to issue 75, which was created by Zilker team. So that was about Linux first, but it was talking mostly about the fact that we need some general config, and we need overrides for different specific systems. And on top of that, we'll probably need some custom override, which is actually, highest priority is kind of your customization, which you put on top of everything. So those two probably will start developing them. They will need to go together so that the architecture for them can fit both use cases.
Yeah, in this case, they actually might propose to use Docker native functionality of merging Docker Compose files, which are pretty nice. And the efforts to make it work not really big, because we'll just have to extend our scripts which we deliver, which can actually grab all the Docker Compose YAMLs and use them as together. Looks good. Guys, what do you think? What about those?
So I'm just trying to think this through. So if you run build compose and it generates the Docker file, Docker compose file, and then let's say I make some custom changes to it, I want to preserve my file, but then let's say there's a new version of Docker Cloud, right? And I want to run build compose again to get that new feature or whatever it is. How would that work? How would it actually generate that file but still preserve my changes? I guess I'm not understanding how that would work.
Yeah, I've also left a comment in this issue, like if you could scroll down regarding the same. Yep.
Yes, I think right now the flow, probably how most users are doing that, they are just changing directly the generated Docker file. In reality, probably we should be having some separate file for customizations where you actually override the settings which you have in default one. So that when you regenerate the default one, essentially your override one can still work with that, unless there is something really backward incompatible.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So I think the one that's generated should be left alone, and if you want to add customizations, you create another file with your customizations.
Yep.
Yeah, so we can actually make the next thing. So we can, for example, you as a custom user, you will have, I don't know what I can change.
Yeah.
It's not valid actually point, but let's keep it. So, for example, you will have your custom file, which is docker-compose. And what we can add, we can actually extend the Magento Docker to grab the docker-compose YAML files here and pass them as a parameter to merge together, where your custom Docker Compose will be on top of our Docker Compose, which looks pretty convenient.
Yes.
Maybe we can do this way.
Yes, I like that. That way, then you can still regenerate the file and it'll rewrite whatever, but your custom changes will be preserved in your own file.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Okay, I will add this comment then, and will update the issue with such approach. If you will have any different ideas, let's keep this updated. Okay, looks good. Everybody agree?
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. We did 4 or 5 issues today. We are out of time for our first grooming. Let's keep on track on those issues. If you need any help, we are always in the Cloud Docker Slack. I will schedule next session maybe next week or maybe on bi-weekly basis, but let's keep doing.
Do we want for future to make it longer or more frequent?
Yeah. We will. I think we will have 1 hour because the problem was with this particular window. Everybody was too busy to sync for 1 hour, but I will make it longer next time. And one more thing that I would like to also share. So, as many of you know, we have open source at magento.com, which consists of a Magento open source project. So today we added Magento Cloud Tools and Magento Cloud Docker projects. So you can find them here as well as other projects. And also we will update the community calendar with events. I didn't have a chance to add today's grooming, but for sure I will add for the next time, so more people be aware of our great grooming sessions. Thank you guys for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Stop recording?
No, you just